Well, welcome to Human Meet Machine. As I mentioned before we started recording, this is our second episode. So this is a brand new version of a previous meetup that I used to host, Agile Conversations. So today we have a guest that I'm super excited for. I've been excited for since the last meetup last month. But he happens to be somebody that was also on Agile Conversations. So this is the second time he is with us for this meetup. But I started to put together a brief mission statement for our group here. So let me just quickly read this out to you so we can set the tone for the conversation today. As always, this is something that you're going to be listening in on, a fly on the wall experience between myself and a guest, and then we'll have you come off mute, maybe on camera at the very end in order to ask us questions about what you heard. So the mission of this group is to build a diverse, inclusive community of AI professionals, so both technical and non-technical. Whether you're an experienced software engineer or not, this affects all of us. And I want to have us all support each other at the very beginnings of this journey, but also as this journey unfolds. My mission is to help prepare the workforce for the fourth industrial revolution. So the meeting of humans and machines, and what does that mean for us and our value as we move into this new space? Also, I want to have an open dialogue with people who are on the front lines navigating this change. So not the ones that are kind of putting the change on us, like the Sam Altmans of the world or the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, but the people who are dealing with this on the front lines on a day-to-day basis, because that's who we all are. We're trying to figure this out together. So I'm excited here to have my second guest, and I will let him introduce himself. So tell us your name, your location, your current role, so what you're doing now, because I know it's changed since we talked last time,
Yeah.
and a brief career journey. So how did you get here?
Yeah. So first off, thanks for having me. Second off, is there a third timer's jacket? If I get on this again for a third time, would I get some kind of a jacket? Because
Yes.
I'm going to try to start a thing here. But yeah, my name's JJ. I'm currently based in Berlin, Germany. Moved here in January and having a blast so far. And I am currently a developmental coach. I'm self-employed, so I operate my own practice. And I work with technical professionals for navigating life transitions, usually career transitions or what bring them in. And then I work with them across a range of different challenges that they're navigating, especially in today's more chaotic times, let's say. For the last 10 years, I've been basically a small business and startup with 𝗪𝗵𝗍𝗍. I've done a whole lot of things, including software development, technical training, leadership team development, consulting work, sales, digital marketing. I could bore you with a full list, but I'll kind of pause there and just say I've done a lot of things. I've worked with a lot of businesses. I've got a passion for entrepreneurship and have really enjoyed being self-employed for the last year. And that's what brings me here.
So I know that you're a development coach. So I want to ask, like, because even to clarify for myself, what does a
Yeah.
developmental coach do? And how did you find your way there?
Yeah, so developmental coach is someone that works with people in a way that helps them get unstuck and more resourced in an enduring way. So a lot of people kind of associate coaching with sports coaching or performance coaching, where the goal is to work with someone who tends to be an expert in a specific domain, and they help you acquire skills that you're missing, offer accountability as you set goals, and that's sort of the framework of coaching as people know it. I do that, but I also have training in internal family systems oriented approaches. And I can kind of support people with the internal blockers that keep them from actually accomplishing their goals, as well as helping them develop resilience, calm in the face of stressful change. So developmental coaches basically help people grow up into more expanded versions of themselves that can tackle all aspects of their lives with greater efficacy. So that's the short version.
Excellent. Well, I'll skip over the how we know each other because, a lot of the people on this call know that we met on LinkedIn, like I've met most of the people in this room, but we've known each other for many years. We keep in touch, even though we are veering in, I guess, different directions, right? We were both very passionately involved in the Agile community. You were the Kanban king. That was your moniker.
God, that was a lifetime ago.
Even though we've kind of wandered away from some of those commonalities there, we've still kept in touch and still talk on a monthly basis. I'm super excited for, not to detour this, but super excited for your move to Berlin, and what that unfolds for you. But I'm curious why, because we've had great conversations about this, but if in a nutshell, like what about being a developmental coach makes you interested in AI? And, of course, you're an entrepreneur. So, like, same question, like, why are you here to talk about this today? Because isn't AI supposed to be people that are like super technical writing lines of code?
Well, I mean, part of it is I have background as a technologist and I never really put that down. I still write applications, I still build my own software. And I've always been interested in back-end processes. That's been a big way that I contribute to the businesses that I work with, is I kind of help them figure out all their systems and how they connect. So just as an enthusiast, I'm an interested party with artificial intelligence. I think it's cool. I grew up watching Star Trek. I saw people talk to computers and I thought, man, wouldn't it be cool if we got to that future? And then 2023 hit and ChatGPT was announced, and I saw that we were starting to inch closer to that. As a developmental coach, because I mostly work with people in tech, some of whom are actively building these technologies or developing the products that are getting them to a more public-facing capacity, I can see how much uncertainty this has created for people. And it's often a topic of conversation. So it's behooved me to be very fluent in what's happening. I'm also kind of a philosopher, so I'm curious about the human condition and curious to see what artificial intelligence does to our understanding of what it means to be human. And as an entrepreneur, I'm building a business. I want to find ways to allow things to be more efficient if I can. I want to find ways to integrate technologies in ways that are useful. And so, yeah, I have a wide range of angles of interest with artificial intelligence.
Excellent. So there's a lot that you said there, and we have our little sort of script that we're following here, but as you know, this is an organic conversation. So whatever you say, I might like latch onto it and take it in a different direction. But I want to talk about like this utopian promise that we've all been made, that AI is going to save us from these mundane tasks, do all the boring work for us, and free us up to have more time and do that creative work that we are desiring to do. So I want to ask your opinion, like, do you think that this is a reality? And like, what is it freeing us up to do exactly?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have a friend who is also a coach, and he's partnering with a guy that runs a startup in Canada. And I think he's got something like 40 or 50 people, and they're working on a software product. They've been around for a little while. I don't even know if they technically qualify as startup at this point. But what the guy that runs this company is doing is he's running an experiment. And the experiment is, by integrating these technologies into the company, what efficiencies can we create to save people time? And instead of getting rid of people or reducing their salaries, what if we just gave them more hours back? Instead of working 40 hours, what if they worked 35 hours, 30 hours? And to my knowledge, that experiment's ongoing, but the reason he brought this friend of mine who's a coach in was to help people start to deal with the potential emotional and even existential impact of that. I mean, we've been conditioned for most of our adult lives to work full-time hours, to work on a 9 to 5 or some sort of a standard schedule. Although for people in tech and IT support, sometimes those hours get kind of different depending on time zones that you're serving and all those different constraints. And it's been interesting hearing from him because a lot of people just don't know what to do with themselves. I mean, I've known a lot of people who went self-employed and they just kept on working 9 to 5, and it takes time to get out of that shift and to make the shift from I have to work these hours because someone tells me to oh, I can just stop working now, or I could choose to work at this time, or I could really be discerning about the ways I use my time so it doesn't necessarily have to be the way it was when I was working for someone else. So I frame all that to say that if we were to get all this time back, and it's unclear that that's going to happen anytime soon, because anyone that works with these tools knows that they're not very mature yet. Like I wouldn't trust ChatGPT or even the vibe coding stuff to build anything more complex than a pretty simple CRUD application. So the maturity is not quite there yet. But even if we got these hours back, I'm not quite sure we'd know fully what to do with ourselves. So I do think there's a bigger question about how we've been conditioned to work in these ways and how these technological shifts could cause us to question those norms.
Yeah. And I participate in a lot of AI groups, inside and outside of my company. And I mean, like an hour ago, I was in one and they were discussing this new, I guess these two Korean college students came up with like a rival to Notebook LM.
Hmm.
And it was interesting, but inevitably somebody raises their hand and says, this is great, but how do I keep up with all of this? Because this is not my day job to study this or learn it or use it. Like I have a day job as an accountant or whatever the people do in my company. But
Yeah.
like how do we keep up with this? But I also want to like pull on something else you said about like the fear. Have humans
Hmm.
really woken up to what this shift is going to look like? And it may not be tomorrow, but the fear of, especially for like white collar, like knowledge workers, like our brain
Yeah.
is the source of our income. If something starts to take that over, what do we do? Like, what do we do around here? Like Office Space, right? I put that
Yeah.
the other week. What does that mean for us? And is this existential, or is it like people talking about this like that belong in the clouds, or is this real? That we need to think about this and figure this out.
Well, I say this as a person that lives abroad. So I've had a lot of interesting cultural experiences. There are a lot of people in Berlin who don't take card, they're cash only. So, that's just a commentary on technologies make it to some places, they don't make it to other places. I think the truth of how all this unfolds, how artificial intelligence is integrated into different businesses, it's going to be a lot messier than a hook-driven LinkedIn post would like to present it. But that being said, the goal of a lot of these companies that are developing large language models, pushing towards artificial general intelligence, something that's actually autonomous, able to perform knowledge work tasks like write software or do other creative work, it does represent a little bit of an existential threat to fields where people get paid for those specialized skills. And the metaphor that I've liked to use when I've talked to people about this, it's the way that I understand it is I used to work in construction a long time ago when I was in the military. I was a combat engineer. And one time I was asked to dig this huge hole in the ground. It was like 7 feet by 7 feet. It took like 5 or 6 of us to dig it out. No, that's way too small. It was a big hole. I don't know how big it was. That's not the point. It took like 5 or 6 of us hours with shovels to dig the hole. If we had had a small piece of heavy equipment with one of those decent sized buckets, it would have taken like a half an hour. And so I think maybe the more sane way to look at some of this stuff is that as different fields find ways to integrate mature products into their workflows, I could see there being some exponentials that make it easier to do some of these tasks that require fewer people to do those things. And I think ultimately that's what business owners want, because labor is the largest source of overhead for most businesses. So if you could hire one person to do the work for 5 people, it's kind of a no-brainer. I think it's more that than entire fields being evaporated within a few years, but we'll see.
Yeah, and I think even though there's so much in the news every day, I mean, I've worked for some and still work for big corporations. I see how slowly they move. And
Yeah,
even though what I'm seeing going on where I work is really exciting and there's lots of really intelligent people working on these solutions, I'm still wondering how people are going to incorporate these things, because change is a I know this is not really like about change management, but there's a lot of change management, even for the smallest tool. I mean, should I bring up Jira, right? No, let's not bring up Jira. Like people still can't use that darn thing. And it's just
yeah,
gotten worse and worse. So I'm not comparing this to Jira, but you know, there's a certain amount of change management that has to happen. And I'm really curious, like how long it's going to actually take to roll this stuff out. So
yeah.
um, I want to switch to like another topic about entrepreneurship. We've talked about this before. We're both had our feet dipped into entrepreneurship as well as full-time employment, etc. We're all out there on LinkedIn, and there are people out there saying everybody should just quit their jobs, just become an entrepreneur. You
Mm,
know, it's your full-time job is not secure. This way, you won't be replaceable, whatever their messages are. And it's very easy to get sucked into those messages and believe them. And
yeah.
maybe that works for one person or 5 people or 10 people. But is this the solution to everybody? And I want to ask, because we've talked about this, and I'm curious, like, where your mind is around this.
Well, I've been self-employed for about a year now, and I was working with a very small startup as I was starting this business. So I was helping to build 2 things. And what's really struck me about entrepreneurship, number one, is it's really hard, which is a very simple statement. But I think if you pay a lot of attention to the marketing kind of tries to jab at your pain, the lack of autonomy that you experience with your work situation, toxic cultures, changes that you can't control that are coming from on high, from people elevated in hierarchies that don't have much close contact with the realities of your day-to-day work. So you're like, all right, screw it, I've got these skills, I'm going to go into business for myself. And I see this a lot in the coaching field because I work with a lot of people and support a lot of people who also have been building their coaching practices. And it's one thing to be really good at a skill, and it's another thing to be good at building a business. And they're 2 very different things with different competencies. So if you build a business, you have to get really good at sales and marketing first and foremost, because if you don't have people interested in buying what you're selling, then you don't have a business. Bookkeeping, most people have gotten pretty used to getting a W-2 every year and doing a TurboTax thing for some time. Maybe their portfolios are a little bit more complex than that, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. When you start your own business, you have to like do really detailed expense tracking. There's a lot more to understand. God forbid you're doing what I'm doing and you live in multiple countries. Don't ever do that. That's a terrible idea from a tax perspective. So the amount of overhead that you take on, the amount of responsibility you take on is significant. Now, I'm having a blast. I hope I do this for the rest of my life. It's good for me. I don't think it's good for everyone, and I definitely don't think it's a solution. It's not a very skillful way to solve the problem of fear of uncertainty.
incredibly hard. We've talked about the book, The E-Myth Revisited, which is
Mm,
a book that I read. I know it's an older book, but I think I read it in 2019 or something around that.
yeah,
And it was kind of when I was first starting Agile Mindset Consulting. And I realized, oh my gosh, I understand. Like, and I mentioned this to you, I had this small business. I was married to somebody else at the time. And um, we hired coaches and consultants to help us because we struggled so badly. And this was at a time when everybody was not an entrepreneur.
right.
So there was no resources out there. Like this is before like Facebook existed or YouTube existed, right? So when you think about
Yeah,
how much has happened since that, but anyways, how like after a year, like we were at the financial brink. It was really, really because we borrowed money and put everything into it. I know
yeah,
it's not the same now, right? You can start up a business for a few $1,000s or whatever,
yeah,
but the in reading this book, I realized the people that we hired to help us to get through this really rough time and get into the black and grow and grow and grow, they were applying all of these concepts that were in this book, and I realized I wish I would have known this to begin with. I wish
yeah,
I would have read this. And it is about starting a business and scaling it, but it applies as a solopreneur as well, because you have to play all the hats in a business. And
yeah,
as an employee, you have a certain set of skills, a deep set of skills in something, right? Software engineering, agile coaching, what have you. But you don't have the skills to be a bookkeeper and HR and operations and this and that and whatever. And that's something you really need to think about. And I'm not saying
yeah.
you should go for it, but I think what I said to you the other week was like, if we all were going to be entrepreneurs, we would have done it by now.
Oh, yeah. And
It's been out there
to
for
be,
how many, like a decade at this point? Online entrepreneurs start a website.
yeah. And the bubble is real. I mean, I think less than 1% of users on LinkedIn, if we can just call attention to that platform, actually post content.
Yeah.
I'd question how many of those folks that are advertising businesses have been successful or how they would measure success. Um, I think I've seen a statistic that says something like 90% of startups fail. The whole venture capital game is basically it's kind of gambling. You're gambling that you're going to be able to fund enough ideas through to some sort of viability that at least one or two of them will get you a return on your investment, but then justify how much you just spent on these other companies that tanked, right? So if it was easy, everyone would do it. It's not easy. It is one option to deal with the future, but there's certainly other ways to do it that include continuing to be a full-time employee.
Yeah. So the other piece of this, right, to allay people's fears, like we're not discouraging entrepreneurship, right? And I think there's a mention of like start a side hustle and see how it goes.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely ways to dip your
but
toes in these waters.
but even realizing that then getting enough income coming in per month and then quitting your job is another like panic attack that you have to work through, because all of a sudden your income goes from like whatever it is, like 10 grand to like 3 grand. And
Yeah,
that panic of like, oh my gosh, my value though is 10 grand a month. So there's that piece that you have to wrestle with and the fear that it'll dry up. But
yeah,
anyway, I want to shift to the concept of entrepreneur because we've had great conversations around this as well. And
yeah,
I've done this as, an employee in companies to gain an incredible amount of skill. So I want to ask you to talk about that a little bit. Like if we don't want to be entrepreneurs, it's not for us. How can we flex in our current role to go somewhere else? And regardless if we don't know what that somewhere else might lead us to, at least it's a stepping stone.
yeah. Well, I think the adoption of artificial intelligence tools, especially as they become more mature, is going to involve companies running a lot of small experiments and sometimes big experiments. And something that I found, and it's something I really liked about working for small companies, is if you had the right support and structure, you could be intrapreneurial and spot problems or spot opportunities within that organization and pitch a role or pitch an experiment, pitch a project, pitch a product, and then see that to some form of fruition that could lead to a shift, whether it's a new role for you, a new revenue stream for the business that you're a part of. And the politics of this are different for different sized companies. So I just want to name that it's way easier to say, yeah, just try to pitch a new role at your company than to actually do it. Like, I know the folks that work in corporate will be like, yeah, I'll just pitch a new role, buddy. That's going to work out for me. Because I get it. Like, I've worked at larger companies too, and you just have to pick off the menu that you can pick off of. Hope you have the skills to match, play the politics, network internally while also networking externally. It's a totally different game to play. But I remember I was working for a business probably about 7 years ago, and it was small, like head count 30 people maybe. And they were contracting a third-party company to do its digital marketing. And they really sucked. No offense to the company. I don't think anyone from that company's here, but they weren't doing the job. They didn't have an outcomes focused approach. They were just kind of creating the social media calendar, putting out a bunch of stuff, didn't really understand the business. And so my entryway into pitching something was, I'd like to take over some of this, learn the ropes, because I understand the business and I think I can do a better job than this. And it worked out pretty well. Like, it legitimately did lead to increases in leads and revenue for the company, and they didn't have to spend as much money on a third-party contractor that wasn't getting them results or being accountable to the results they were supposed to get. So I think that kind of a mindset can be really beneficial for folks that are getting the lay of the land, learning the new technologies, spotting the opportunities, and if they feel like it's worth their time and investment to pitch something or pursue a project or suggest an experiment, run with it and see how it goes.
I would maybe share a little bit about some of the things that I've done throughout my career, and we talk about what I did just a few days ago. So, but let me before I get into that, my new role that I've just pivoted into. Some of you may have heard me talk about this before, and maybe even JJ, like how when I was trying to get a Scrum Master role in 2020, yeah, I crashed right into the COVID. I crashed right into COVID there. Like, I started applying to roles like March 1st of 2020. So like
Oh,
there was
goodness.
that piece, and like, remember that happened?
Oh, yeah.
There was that piece in that, but like, I was working for a startup for a number of years at that point, and I decided I wanted to stretch my wings and start to work at a bigger company. And I was applying around Charlotte here, and it's like nobody wanted to give me the time of day, even though for this startup, I was doing all of these things like building teams and planning across teams, and not only Scrum Master work, but Agile coach work. Nobody even wanted to look at me. So I had to learn how to sell myself. So I got hired as like an entry-level Scrum Master at a bank here in Charlotte. And it was for the marketing transformation, which I was super excited about because I had done my own small business marketing. So I used that to slide in to a big company because most Scrum Masters were technical or software engineers, or at least at that time.
Yeah.
When I got onto the job, I said, okay, I'm going to look around because I'm entrepreneurial. I'm going to look around and I'm going to see what can I raise my hand for so I can get those agile coaching things on my resume. So they needed somebody to help build a team assessment. And I'm like, okay, I've never done that before, but okay. Because I knew, like, I was passionate about like the 5 dysfunctions of a team and like forming, storming, norming, all of these theories and and concepts that we all talked about in the Agile world. And I did it. I figured out how to build it. I pressure tested it. I put it out to teams, and I was able to build this skill and then turn around and sell this as a service in my private business, Agile Mindset Consulting. So I sold that as a service to smaller companies saying, hey, I can help you build an assessment tool and we can co-create it. So it's not some thing off the shelf that doesn't apply to you. But I was really scared to raise my hand for this thing initially because I didn't know what to do. But I said, I'm going to figure it out because it's important to me to get these agile coaching skills on my resume. And it was the same thing with like standing up new teams and doing the training. Like the coach had to go somewhere else. So I just raised my hand and say, I have a training background, I'll do it. And again, like if you want to get as a job as an agile coach, you need to be able to train teams, like build trainings and execute the trainings. So that was a way for me to get the skills right there on the job. And then immediately, next contract, agile coach at another rank. So it took 1 year for me to do that. And, you know, it was a long game, right? You can't, it's not going to happen overnight, but this is how you move in the world and, you know, flex your skills. And I found that very helpful for me. What I did recently, and I just started a new role 5 days ago. Is it 6 days?
Congratulations, by the way.
So
fresh out of the oven.
fresh out of the oven, right? The fire hose is on me. But I shifted from agile coaching to content curation and strategy. And it was something that fell into my lap. As I mentioned, I am still involved in all of these AI groups at my company. And I'm using these as a way to learn, you know, all these groups and meetups and all these things. And I'm trying to keep up, but what I realized is the piece about change management is training. That's my skill, right? To train people.
Yeah.
So how can I pivot myself into maybe a larger change management training role in an organization? Well, let me skip over to here. So I moved into human capital, which is HR, you know, learning and development. So this fell into my lap because I was part of a enterprise chat GPT pilot last year. And one of the facilitators of the training that I was a part of didn't know the guy. I reached out to him. I said, hey, if I was interested in moving into L&D, doing what you do, like, what would I do? I don't know what my skill gaps are. Didn't know the guy, but LinkedIn has made me really good about this, reaching out to total strangers. So he said, I don't know, but let me pass you to my manager. So I met with her. She pulled somebody else in. They said, we actually have a role that's open right now. We're having trouble filling it because it's a year contract. And that makes people feel nervous. So at the end of this year, I technically don't have a job. So I said to myself, this opportunity came up. Other people are afraid to take it because of that uncertainty. But I'm going to walk through the door here and I'm going to take it because now I'm going to help the company on a broader scale train their employees, upskill their employees on emergent technology. And what a way for me to learn, be in it all day long, but also help the next level of rolling out AI. So I don't know where I'm going to be in 12 months. But I'm confident that something will show up because it always does. But this is a muscle that I've had to build through entrepreneurship and through constantly taking risks. So I don't know if you knew all of that, but blah, I just shared it.
As you were talking, well, number one, it struck me that to be a trainer, you have to be a learner. And something I've always appreciated about you is that you're a constant learner. You're always curious. Like I remember us talking about the things you were learning about AI over a year ago. when ChatGPT was really first starting to hit the mainstream and people were making it more and more of a part of their daily use. So you definitely have that muscle well developed, and it's been pretty cool to watch you do it. The question I have for you, I'm kind of turning the tables a little bit here.
Most students three.
Well, how do you deal
Go
with the
for it.
uncertainty? Because I mean, what you're talking about is something that I've seen from a lot of people is almost this wishing to go back to a time when you used to be able to have a job for decades.
Yep.
And the skill sets remained relatively stable. Relatively, there was always room for growth and development. Usually the company handled that too. They trained you, they continued to train you. There were like clear ladders of progression. And it really seems like that's broken down now. And it's only getting even more uncertain and chaotic. So to land a 12-month contract is like awesome. But 20 years ago, it'd be like, really? Like, you're celebrating that? That just seems tremendously unstable. So how do you navigate that uncertainty without losing your mind?
Well, I think so. It's making me think of a couple of things. The recruiter, when I talk to them, so this is a 12-month internal contract, and they can't guarantee that they're going to extend it. So it's like being a contractor.
Yeah.
The recruiter kept saying to me, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure?" And I actually had a moment of like, what the heck am I doing? I don't have a job in 12 months.
Hmm.
What am I doing here? Is this the wrong move? And I had a moment of panic. And I, I speak to the people that are like my trusted advisors and say, when I made the decision to apply to this, I made this in a rational state of mind. Can you please remind me 2 days ago when I told you what my reasons were for taking this? Can you please remind me of that? Because right now I'm feeling really nervous. Um, but
Hmm.
what I said to the person that interviewed me is I said, you know what? I'm going to have faith that the universe is going to open the door for me in 12 months because
Yeah.
this is what always happens. I have been a contractor. I've been a business owner that has to constantly get clients, and the next one always shows up whether you panic about it or not. It shows up. But the thing is, you have to stay calm and you have to take the steps to put yourself in front of people that will open more doors for you.
Yeah.
So I think a long-winded answer there is, I realize that not everybody has this ability, but this is something that I've been developing probably since I quit my teaching job in 2009 and went into business full time with the person from my past. Um, and you still run up as you take bigger and bigger risks, you get more and more scared, but you have to keep going because you turn around and say, I made it this far. I'm still here. I still have a job. Like, it's
Yeah.
good. Whatever is going to happen is going to open the doors, but it's not like wishful thinking, if that makes sense. I have to take the
Yeah.
courageous action to put those opportunities in front of me.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Did
sounds
that
like
answer your
there's
question?
what's that?
Did that answer your question?
Oh, it was beautiful. Yeah. What I was pulling from that was a baseline level of trust that things will work out and that there will be opportunities. And I think you've also just built the muscle of learning to take risks, do it, even if all the reactions come up, which they will. I mean, I've certainly experienced that every time I like take a bigger risk, make a bigger ask, um, try a different offer. It's it's scary every time. I think being self-employed, entrepreneurial, or working in chaotic industries, or being in the startup space, it's like the all-time greatest personal development lab because you're constantly getting mirrored back all of your stuff or the ways that you don't communicate quite as well as you thought you did, or you didn't think as strategically or as clearly as you thought you did. And I think developing the ability to take those risks and then look within at the stuff that comes up is extremely valuable, especially in this climate, because there's huge opportunity here. I mean, I'm worried about some AI stuff for sure. There's worrying things there and things we should talk about and think about. But there's also, I think, some cool things coming and some opportunities and new things that we could be a part of building. And I want to lean into that excitement and be a part of the conversation and, of course, a part of some of that risk rather than look for the safe waters and wonder what could it have been like? How could I have contributed? Or what conversations could I have been a part of that otherwise wouldn't have been possible?
Yeah. And it is scary, like you said, but I think I mentioned this to you, I don't know when this was, right? The AI is making everybody's job so uncertain. There's no guarantee that, like, if I stayed at my old job, if that would be there in a year or 3 years. So
Yeah,
I've got to move. I've got to find a way to continuously stay relevant because there's no guarantee of anything anymore. And we can take that as a message to put ourselves, like, put our heads in the sand and say, no, everything's going to be fine. It's all going to work out. This is all hype. Yeah, there's a lot of hype out there.
yeah, for sure.
If you keep your ear to the ground and really keep your head on straight, you realize I got to move. I got to keep moving because
Yeah,
if we have one life to live, I don't want to turn around in like 40 years and say, why didn't I do this? Because one of my favorite authors, and I'm trying to think, I probably have his book back here, Dan Pink. He wrote this book
hmm,
about regrets. And he said he interviewed people all over the globe. And the one common thing that he found that people regret is not taking the chance.
yeah,
And especially when you get older and, more years are behind you than in front of you, you start to think about these things more. Um, So I'm going to continue to push myself. I don't know where I'm going to be in a year, but that's exciting because what that puts me in, it puts me in the driver position to create my future. And like I said, I just have to have faith that it's going to continue to work out because it always has. Um,
yeah.
so I know we're like almost at time here. Do you have any final thoughts about this conversation? And then maybe if some people want to ask some questions about what they heard, because they've been sitting here listening and taking all of this in, like, what do they think?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the topic of the conversation was centered around human value. Um, I think one of the reasons I decided to become a coach, besides just the fact that people leadership and people development's been the thing that I can't escape for like my entire career, and so I sort of paid attention to the signs there and leaned into it, is because I love sitting in conversations with people and affirming to them that what they do does not determine their value. And I think in times like these, when there is more uncertainty, people are getting laid off, people are being, what do they say on LinkedIn now? Being made redundant, the
Yeah,
stupidest thing in the world. Like, no, it's a human being, not
right.
a redundancy, not a machine, right? Skills do atrophy, they become irrelevant, you learn new skills, people pay you for those skills. That's always going to continue as long as we have an economy. But I think there's also invitations here to ask maybe deeper questions about how we source that value, how we experience our own value, and how times like these give us those windows, transitions especially, give us those windows to ask questions. Like, am I putting too much of my sense of my own worth in what a company pays me or says about the relevancy of my skills? And I think there's an invitation there to do some inquiry. So that would be my final thought, is value is not just these skills. Even if AI takes your job, you still have inherent worth as a human. And there's a lot there.
Awesome. Well, we have a few minutes here. Maybe we can take a couple of questions. So,
Yeah.
um, whoever wants to ask or even make a comment, feel free to come off mute. If you want to turn your camera on, that would be even more awesome so we can see your smiling face.
I have a question. This is Arlen. Arlen
Oh, hey,
Avery.
Arlen.
Hey, hey. So I've been more involved in a lot of these conversations around AI as well. So really, as AI continues to more so evolve, and we see it outperform humans in more so redundant tasks and like data processing and more so like pattern recognition. How can we, I guess, redefine the unique value of human intelligence around the areas like creativity, empathy, and also ethical decision making? Because I think that was a question that I had similar to our last meetup, was around the ethical decision making around AI. But just would love to get your thoughts on kind of redefine the unique value around human intelligence as far as creativity, empathy, and ethical decision making.
Should I jump in, Patty?
Yeah, jump in.
Does everyone have another hour? Because that's a it's an awesome question. I think about this a lot. So one of the things that I'm trained in is the method of coaching called somatic coaching, which is basically helping people connect their bodies as a resource of resilience, a resource of intelligence for folks that sit in front of screens and live in our heads most days, especially in tech. It's helpful to be reconnected with different aspects of our experience that have useful information, instincts, or even what the heart has to tell us, especially in our relationships. AI, from where I'm standing, is extremely good at synthesizing what's already existed. So far, I haven't seen anything truly creative come from my explorations with it. So it's kind of a two-parter. Number one, I think in redefining human value, we can look to other ways that we are intelligent that's not just cognitive. A lot of the knowledge work economy has put an emphasis on what we know, and there are different ways to know, not just through sort of an algorithmic thinking process, which is what a lot of tech skills kind of come down to. There is the ability to make novel connections and combine things that don't make sense. That's creativity. And we have ways to explore that and bring that into these creative processes that I'm not quite sure artificial intelligence will ever be able to fully do. So connecting with other sources of intelligence, reclaiming a more expanded definition of humanity, and then bringing those resources into the conversation as we integrate artificial intelligence. That'd be my very abstract and philosophical answer.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll just add to that a little bit. I posted this a few days ago, how we're moving away from the knowledge economy to the wisdom economy. So when you have these, they're not sentient beings, but when you have these computers that know way more than we do, it's up to us to figure out what to do with all that knowledge. So we have to be able to tell the computer what to do, so to speak. And that's where like prompt engineering comes in, but also making sense of what the computer tells us and then taking action on that information. So moving away from using AI as like Google search, and retraining our brains to think about this as if we had like a person sitting next to us and we were a team. What could we accomplish together? Because this person knows more than I do. I bring different skills to the table. What can we do? That's the way I see it. And I'm excited for the future. I don't know where we're all going with all of this, but I think there's a lot of promise. And if you can kind of keep your head away from the gloom and doom, which is hard,
Yeah.
then we can push this to some really good limits.
Can I jump in with one thing too? Because I think if it was Alan, I hope I'm not getting your name incorrect. You were also mentioning ethical decision making, and I think you're kind of speaking a little bit to this, Patty, in the wisdom economy, how we make decisions when it's not just a corporate ethical framework that's being handed down. Because theoretically speaking, if you can train large language models on ethics, then you could just set them loose and they would be able to act with perfect ethics all the time in any given task or context or scenario. And I think what I'm curious about, I don't have answers, but what I'm curious about is how we can have a different human-centered conversation around ethics. That's one of the reasons I really like Anthropic as an AI company, because I feel like they're taking a really intentional stance with ethics. So it's more of the flag that I think there's a lot to say in the ethics thing, but it's like a drag on the speed of progress. And so that just, I just wanted to flag that as very interesting to me.
Yeah. And maybe that's a good topic to bring to the meetup. So
yeah,
figure out somebody who is interested in discussing the ethics, because I'm interested in it as well. So
yeah,
let me ponder that. And if anybody has any suggestions, they know somebody that's really, or themselves is really passionate about that topic. Again, you don't need to be an expert, but like we're here to discuss, like with real people, what they think is going on, as opposed to, like I said, Sam Altman or whomever, right?
yeah.
Different conversation. But I do want to say we are at about time, you know, and I promised we'd leave by 12:55. So just a quick wrap up because we're over time. I am planning out the next two, and I'm looking to bring in people to explore the future of software development. So both on a micro level, so like the day-to-day about how roles, what they would do and how they would change and what that means. And also people on like the macro level, like what does that mean for, you know, products and technology and everything out there in the world in general. So I have a whole bunch of people that I'm kind of talking to bring them in. And I think this would be a really interesting conversation, especially since a lot of us are in this space. So if you have, of course, if you have any suggestions, please let me know. But that's what I'm planning for the next two meetup. Maybe one interview and then one panel to get a variety of viewpoints.
That sounds really exciting.
Well, as always, JJ, great talking to you. Great seeing
Yeah.
again. I'm sure we'll talk again in the not too distant future. And I will see you next month. Feel free to reach out if you have anything to say or share. I'm always around. And JJ as well. LinkedIn, of course.
Yes, you can find us there. Thanks everyone for coming. It was good to see so many familiar faces.